So indeed, in this presentation, we will move to the protection of geographical indication in third country, because as I heard yesterday in the presentation of Stefan, he mentioned that with geographical indication, as you know, the principle of territoriality apply, but what is very important is that in GI law, you need to be protected in your country of origin before thinking to obtain protection in third country and on third market. So I will just briefly go through the different way you can obtain protection internationally and then focus on the Lisbon system and the new Geneva Act. So the different way to obtain protection for your GIs in third market is to go through direct application in third country and ask for that protection, as you can do with other intellectual property rights. There is, of course, bilateral and plurilateral agreement. And for instance, the European Union has concluded a lot of such agreement, which are part often of a bigger trade agreement. And the two parties exchange a list of geographical indication, then they protect mutually to each other. We have then at international level the TRIPS agreement, who fix a minimum level of protection for GIs, who also defined internationally the concept of geographical indication. And then if we move to WIPO, we have two systems that can help to protect geographical indication internationally. The first system I would like to mention is the Madrid Protocol. Madrid Protocol is for trademark, is not specifically developed for geographical indication, but it might be a tool interesting to use, especially for countries who protect geographical indication through the trademark system. So an interesting way to use, and also an interesting way to use to protect the logo that you may have developed specifically for a geographical indication, and who can also benefit from a trademark protection. So don't forget that Madrid Protocol. But the system that was developed by WIPO member who focus specifically on geographical indication is the Lisbon system, and now governed by its new Geneva Act. And that system provide a protection for registered geographical indication in the system, and also an international system of registration. What you need to have in mind when we speak about the Lisbon system is that as the different registration systems that we have in WIPO for patent, trademark, design, there is a possibility for member states to revise the treaty over the time. And this is what happened with the Lisbon system. So the Lisbon Agreement, who founded that Lisbon system, was negotiated in 1958, revised in 1967, and it covers currently 30 countries. But in around 2010, the member of the Lisbon system decided to modernize the system to take into account international development about the protection of geographical indication, and so revise the treaty. And that revision was adopted by a diplomatic conference in 2015 in WIPO. And that new version of the agreement is called the Geneva Act of the Lisbon Agreement, which cover currently 37 countries. And altogether, the Lisbon system is now covering 57 countries. So what are the benefits of the system? The first benefit of the Lisbon system, because it is an international registration system, and because you can obtain protection in a variety of countries through a single registration in WIPO, so the advantage is that instead of going country by country where you want to be protected, you may, through a single registration in WIPO, obtain protection in different countries. The advantage is that you don't need, with such a system, to follow the specific rule for obtaining protection of your GIs of every different country. You don't need to translate the documents. It may support your registration in different language. You don't need to have a lawyer in every country if sometimes it is a requirement, or if there is a problem also to have people to interact directly with the country where you seek protection. So this may be pretty costly if you follow a direct national route through the Lisbon system, so you can obtain protection through the single application in WIPO in different countries. The second benefit of the system is a legal benefit. What is interesting to have in mind with the Lisbon system is that it covers all kinds of products, so from agriculture product, food product, handicraft, manufactured product, but also natural product. Second, once your geographical indication is registered in the Lisbon system, you can obtain a very high level of protection from an international standard point of view, because your GIs will be protected against any usurpation or imitation. This means that the GI cannot be used on products that do not come from the region corresponding to the GIs, and which do not meet also the requirement for production and the requirement of quality of the product. So this is a very strong protection. Of course, every member of the system has the right to decide if on its territory it can or not protect the geographical indication. So decision to protect remain national, but once you obtain that protection, you have that very high level of protection, which is fixed by the Lisbon Agreement. The protection is also indefinite, so there is no possibility for country to ask for renewal fees in order to maintain the protection of your GIs in the Lisbon system. You have also a protection against the fact that the member state cannot consider that if you don't stop some abusive use of the GIs in some country, they say after some time that these following abuses have transformed your GIs into a generic term. So you have that protection against genericity. And finally, you have also a title to take action if there is a problem in a member of the system. What was an important part of the negotiation in 2015, when the Geneva Act was adopted, it was the introduction of several flexibility in the Lisbon system. The first main flexibility introduced was the introduction of the concept of geographical indication. With the old version of the Lisbon Agreement, only appellation of origin were protected. And as you know, appellation of origin is a limited number of geographical indication where the link with the territory is even stronger than with geographical indication. So now is the TRIPS definition fully included in the scope of protection of the Geneva Act. There is also the possibility for protection of trans-border geographical indication, meaning that two neighboring countries who are members of the system, if they have a geographical indication that go on both sides of the border, so the geographical area covered two countries, they can make a single application together and protect so a joint geographical indication in the system. There is also flexibility to recognize the different type of protections that may exist at national level to protect geographical indication. As I mentioned, some countries protect GIs using the trademark system. So now there is a full recognition of that possibility in the system. Several safeguards have also been introduced in order to secure protection of third rights, meaning, for instance, that prior good faith trademarks that may have been registered and protected in a country are indeed safeguarded. They can, depending on the ways the system is developed in the country, coexist perhaps with a geographical indication if that coexistence of that later GIs is not infringing all the right of the trademark owner, or there is a system of first in time, first in right. There is also clear mention that generic term should not be protected as geographical indication. And now member states of the system are obliged to put in place a system where interested parties in the country who are using the name that correspond to the geographical indication can ask for refusal if the protection of the GIs is creating a problem for them. There is also the possibility now for intergovernmental organization to join the system. The European Union did in 2019. So this is why you see that discrepancy between the number of contracting parties and the country covered. So we have the 27 European Union member states covered now by the Geneva Act of the Lisbon Agreement. Soon we wait for the accession also of the African Organization of Intellectual Property, so meaning 17 more countries will be covered by the system. And countries have also the possibility now with the Lisbon system to ask for payment of individual fees to cover the cost of examination of the geographical indication. How the system works in practice. So everything starts at stage 1 at the national level. So the producer, if they have a title of protection, can ask their competent authority, because every member of the Lisbon system has to designate an authority, often is the intellectual property office or department who is in charge of managing the Lisbon system at national level. And so by having that request by the producer or the authority, sometime also by itself, they may decide to make an application for international registration of their GIs to WIPO. So WIPO make a formal examination of that request. We check if all the necessary elements are present, such as the indication of the title of protection at national level, the mention of the GI to protect, the mention of the product. So these are the elements that we need to have in the registration. And everything is well provided in the application. The International Bureau of WIPO registered the geographical indication in the International Registry, and we publish it and send it to the other member of the system. Since we have two versions of the agreement, as I showed you before, if the competent authority of the country of origin is only member of the Geneva Act, we will send that registration to the other member of the Geneva Act. If the country of origin is member of the old version, the Lisbon Agreement, we will send this registration only to the member of the Lisbon Agreement. And if the country of origin is member of both versions of the treaty, we will send it to all the other members. So just to keep in mind that we have now momentarily that separation, and I will explain how things should evolve in future. Once a country receives that international registration, it has 1 year to examine, according to its national law, if it can or not protect the geographical indication on its territory. If the country sees there is a problem, it can issue a refusal. The refusal should contain the reason for the refusal and also the legal means for the user of the GI to contest that refusal. And if the user of the GIs have good arguments that convince the authority who issues a refusal that the GI can be protected, the authority can withdraw at any time the refusal. If the authority thinks that the GI can be protected on its territory, it has two solutions. Or it notifies formally a grant of protection of the GIs to be done within 1 year, or the authority remains silent, and silent within 1 year means protection of the GI. If something has happened, at least if there was a problem that was not detected at the moment of examination, interested party can always go in front of tribunal and ask for invalidation of the protection of the GI. So there is always a safeguard if something was not detected during the 1 year of examination of the GI. You have on this slide example of different GIs protected at least I will mention rather appellation of origin protected under the Lisbon system, because everything which is in black, all the appellations that are in black on this slide are appellation of origin, registered at the time according to the old version of the Lisbon Agreement, but now they are protected also for some country like Peru under the Geneva Act as well, because Peru joined the Geneva Act. And we have Kampot pepper protected as geographical indication under the Geneva Act. And Kampot pepper from Cambodia was the first indeed geographical indication protected under the Geneva Act, and the first GIs as such protected in the Lisbon system. In terms of use of the system, most of the application come nowadays from European country, but we see a growing interest by also developing country, and country like Iran, for instance, are among the biggest applicants in the system, and they use a lot the Lisbon system to valorize and make also recognize our traditional product. So as I mentioned, among the users of the system, the Kampot pepper producer, who were the first obtaining a geographical indication. We have also, and you may have heard already this example, France, so the biggest applicant in the system. So French producer of GIs sees the value of the Lisbon system for very important GIs in terms of production and also worldwide distribution of the product like champagne. But also they are using the Lisbon system for very small niche production, such as the essential oil of Haute-Provence, which is a very niche indeed production. But the facility of use and protection of the system is very interesting also for this smaller geographical indication, so they can secure easily protection all around the world, not only in their export market, because it is important that your GIs is protected also in country where you don't export, because if you don't protect your GIs, you may have people from other region of the country trying to use trademark with the name of your GIs, or just commercializing product using your GIs. And if you don't stop it, then you may have damages for the reputation of your product, or then you may also at some point be prohibited to export your product with the use of your GIs in those countries. So important to think of protection the widest possible, even if it's not a concrete export market for the time being. And the Lisbon system offers you that option. Final example I wanted to mention today is the example of the Jeba fig. And this is a very interesting example because the international registration was the final step of a process that producer and authority from Tunisia put in place in order to valorize that very unique fig that is growing in Tunisia. So Jeba fig was protected as an appellation of origin in Tunisia. Producer worked hard in order to define the standard, to put in place control system for the quality of the product. And with all that investment of quality of the product, but also doing the control and securing this quality product to consumer, the fig become a flagship product of Tunisia. But it is also now exported in the market, so the need for that international protection. And they have also developed local tourism around that fig, and also festival events throughout the year. So you see how with GI you can also indeed secure local development and side activity that can have a positive economic benefit for the region. And international protection is part of that strategy. If you are interested to have information on current registration on the Lisbon system, I invite you to consult our Lisbon Express database or the publication we issue every year, the bulletin. For information also for authorities such as Cambodia or Laos, who are already a member of the system. We have developed now an electronic system for filing of geographical indication and all the transaction like refusal grant of protection related to the Lisbon system. But within that platform that we will slowly open to all competent authority, there is also the possibility to manage the portfolio of national registration, but also the portfolio of registration from third country that the member of the Lisbon system is protecting on its territory. So we really hope to facilitate life of our authority with that electronic tool. And let's see now the perspective of growth of the system, because we are now in a very interesting phase of the development of the system. So as I mentioned before, the Geneva Act was adopted in 2015. It took us 5 years, what is really good in terms of international treaty, to have its entry into force, which was done in 2020. But much more interesting is that, as you see, in 2020, we had 5 contracting parties in the system. And after only 2 years of existence of the Geneva Act, the system covers already 37 countries. So more countries than those covered by the old version in almost 70 years of existence. Here are the members of the Lisbon system, the Geneva Act, sorry. So the country who deposit their instrument of accession, Cambodia being the first, having done so. With the accession of the European Union, the Geneva Act entering into force. And we have now, you see, from different regions all around the world, Laos, for instance, joined also the Geneva Act, and the last country who joined was Peru last July. And what is important to notice with this succession and the tendency also that we are seeing, so I mentioned we have 2 treaties, but in addition to new country joining now the Geneva Act only because it's a new version, the modern version that governs the Lisbon system. So the interest is indeed of members to join the Geneva Act. We have now the member of the old version of the Lisbon Agreement joining also the Geneva Act. So slowly the number of countries only covered by the Lisbon Agreement will diminish, and the Geneva Act will really become the treaty governing the Lisbon system. Here you can see countries who are at a very advanced stage of accession to the Geneva Act. And as I mentioned, what we hope by the end of this year is to have African country joining with OAPI accession, and Senegal has just informed us that they have already their instrument of accession. So within a few days, we should have Senegal also joining the Geneva Act. Final word about activities that WIPO is now doing a lot, and I'm sure you have already heard. We have undertaken several projects on geographical indication, and some also in your region, like for the protection and commercialization of the Kotrum Pomelo in Cambodia. We are now working on Kampot sea salt also in Cambodia, and we will do more projects in your region and in other regions in future. The reason why more member states ask us for having this GI project helping their community to recognize, protect their GIs is also the positive role that geographical indication can play in terms of local and sustainable development. So this is an issue of great interest for WIPO to work in the field with your community to valorize their origin product. So I hope that with this presentation, you have seen how the Lisbon system can help to strengthen the economic value and competitiveness of your origin product on the market. And here you have example of GIs and appellation of origin who already use the system. So we hope soon to count more of your product protected under the Lisbon system. And if you want to follow the development of the Lisbon system, register on our newsletter, follow our webinar. We will restart them next year, or follow the new information on our webpage. I thank you so much for your attention.